The rain poured down in sheets, turning the cracked pavement into a maze of shimmering puddles. Emily Carter pulled her worn hoodie tighter around herself, trying to shield her body from the biting cold. Her fingers were stiff and numb as she rummaged through the dumpster behind an upscale restaurant. She wasn't proud of this scavenging for scraps, but it was how she survived. Life hadn't been kind to her, and she had learned early on that pride wouldn't fill her stomach or keep her warm at night. Her van, parked a block away, was both her home and her sanctuary. It wasn't much, just a rusty old thing with a leaking roof and seats that smelled faintly of mildew, but it was hers. Emily didn't have much else. No family, no steady job, no real friends. Just the clothes on her back and the few belongings she kept stashed in the van. But tonight, she needed something valuable, something she could sell or trade tomorrow. Anything to scrape together enough money for gas and maybe a hot meal. As she leaned deeper into the dumpster, her hand brushed against something soft but firm. At first, she thought it was a bag of trash, but when she tugged on it, it moved. Startled, Emily froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Was it an animal? A rat, maybe? She hated rats. They always seemed to find their way into her van, no matter how many times she tried to seal the cracks. But then she heard a groan, a low, guttural sound that sent chills running down her spine. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out again, pulling aside a layer of soggy cardboard and plastic bags. What she saw made her gasp. There, sprawled among the garbage, was a man. His face was pale, his dark hair matted with dirt and rainwater. He wore an expensive-looking suit, though it was now torn and stained beyond repair. One arm hung limply over the edge of the dumpster, while the other was tucked awkwardly beneath him. His breathing was shallow, and his lips were tinged blue from the cold. For a moment, Emily just stared, unsure of what to do. She had seen plenty of strange things during her night's scavenging, but nothing like this. Who was this man, and why was he in a dumpster? "Hey," she said softly, nudging him gently with her foot. "Are you alive?" He didn't respond, but his chest rose and fell with each labored breath. That was enough for Emily. She couldn't leave him here, not like this. Even if he turned out to be some drunk who'd passed out after a wild night, she couldn't walk away, knowing he might freeze to death. Besides, there was something about him that caught her attention. Despite his disheveled state, he looked important, like someone who belonged in a fancy office or a glossy magazine ad, not lying unconscious in a pile of trash. With a sigh, Emily rolled up her sleeves and grabbed him under the arms. He was heavier than she expected, and dragging him out of the dumpster proved to be a challenge. The rain didn't help either. It slicked everything, making her grip slippery. But eventually, after several minutes of grunting and straining, she managed to pull him onto the wet pavement. Up close, she got a better look at him. His features were sharp and angular, with high cheekbones and a strong jawline. Even covered in filth, he was undeniably handsome. A thin layer of stubble covered his chin, giving him a rugged appearance. His clothes, though ruined, screamed wealth-tailored trousers, a silk shirt, and leather shoes that probably cost more than Emily's entire wardrobe. She checked his pockets quickly, hoping to find some clue about his identity. All she found was a set of car keys and a crumpled business card. The name on the card read, Daniel Brooks, CEO, Brooksteck Industries. Emily's eyes widened. Brooksteck? She'd heard of them before. They were one of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, known for their cutting-edge gadgets and groundbreaking innovations. This Daniel Brooks, was a billionaire. Or at least, he used to be. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" Emily muttered under her breath. She glanced around nervously, half expecting someone to jump out and accuse her of kidnapping. But the street was deserted, save for the occasional car speeding by. Knowing she couldn't leave him there, she dragged him toward her van. It took every ounce of strength she had to hoist him inside, and by the time she finished, her muscles were screaming in protest. She wrapped him in an old blanket she kept in the back seat and cranked up the heater, praying it would last long. Enough to warm him up. Once he was settled, Emily sat in the driver's seat, staring at him in disbelief. What was she supposed to do now? Call the police? Take him to a hospital? Or just dump him somewhere and hope for the best? None of those options felt right. Something told her that this man needed help, real help, and she couldn't shake the feeling that fate had brought them together for a reason. Hours passed before Daniel finally stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, revealing bloodshot eyes that darted around the van in confusion. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse and slurred. Where am I?" he croaked. "You're in my van," Emily replied simply. "I found you. In a dumpster." "A dumpster?" He blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what she'd said. Then his expression shifted to one of anger. "What are you doing? Who are you?" "Do you know who I am?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, I know who you are. You're Daniel Brooks, CEO of Brooks Tech. Big shot billionaire, right?" His scowl deepened. "And why am I here? Why haven't you taken me to my house? Or called my assistant?" "Because you were unconscious in a dumpster," Emily shot back. "And because I don't exactly have your address handy. Look, I don't know what happened to you, but you're lucky I found you. Most people would have left. You there?" Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but then he seemed to deflate. He sank back into the seat, rubbing his temples. "Fine, whatever. Just get me out of here." "Not happening," Emily said firmly. "You're in no condition to go anywhere. Besides, until you sober up, I'm not letting you near my steering wheel." He glared at her, but there was no fight left in him. For now, at least, he was stuck with her. And despite the absurdity of the situation, Emily couldn't help but feel a flicker of curiosity. What had driven a man like Daniel Brooks to end up in a dumpster? And more importantly, what would happen next? As the rain continued to fall outside, Emily started the engine and drove off into the night, unaware that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the cracked windshield of Emily's van, casting a pale glow over the cramped interior. Daniel stirred grudgingly, his head pounding like a drum. His mouth felt dry, and his body ached as if he'd been hit by a truck. Slowly, he opened his eyes and took in his surroundings. The van smelled faintly of old coffee and damp fabric, and the seats were covered with mismatched blankets and patched-up cushions. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't even comfortable, but it was shelter. Emily was sitting in the driver's seat, sipping from a thermos of hot tea. She glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to the road ahead. They were parked on the outskirts of town, near an abandoned gas station that had long since closed down. The silence between them was heavy, but Emily didn't seem bothered by it. She had spent most of her life alone. Quiet moments were nothing new to her. "Where are we going?" Daniel finally asked, his voice rough and raspy. "Nowhere," Emily replied without looking at him. "We're just waiting." "For what?" "For you to decide what happens next." She turned to face him then, her expression calm but firm. "You're not exactly in any shape to go storming back into your fancy office or whatever. So until you figure out your plan, you're stuck with me." Daniel frowned, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. He wasn't used to being told what to do, especially not by someone who looked like they hadn't had a decent meal in weeks. But there was something about Emily's tone that made him pause. She wasn't mocking him or trying to boss him around. She was stating facts, plain and simple. He sighed and leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes for a moment. Memories from the previous night were hazy at best. He remembered drinking a lot and arguing with someone, though he couldn't recall who, and everything went black. How he ended up in a dumpster was still a mystery, but one thing was clear. He had hit rock bottom. So, Emily said after a while, breaking the silence. "Want to tell me how you got here?" Daniel hesitated. He didn't owe her anything, but she had saved his life. That counted for something, right? Besides, talking might help clear his mind. "It's complicated," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Things haven't been going well lately. My company, my personal life, it's all falling apart." Emily nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I built Brooks Tech from the ground up," he explained. "It was supposed to be my legacy, something I could leave behind when I'm gone. But now," he trailed off, shaking his head, "now it feels like a prison. Everyone wants a piece of me, my board members, my investors, even my own family. And no matter what I do, it's never enough." Emily listened intently, her brow furrowed in thought. She couldn't imagine what it must feel like to have so much pressure on your shoulders. But she understood the weight of expectations. Living, paycheck to paycheck, or in her case, meal to meal, had taught her a thing or two about stress. And the drinking? She prompted gently. "That's how I cope," Daniel admitted, his voice tinged with shame. "Or at least, it's how I try to forget. Last night, I don't even remember where I was or who I was with. All I know is that I woke up in your van instead of my penthouse." Emily let out a low whistle. "That's quite the fall. You think I don't know that?" Daniel snapped, his temper flaring. "Do you think I enjoy this? Being trapped in some beat-up old van with a stranger, who probably thinks I'm pathetic." To his surprise, Emily didn't react defensively. Instead, she smiled faintly, almost sympathetically. "I don't think you're pathetic," she said quietly. "I think you're lost." There's a difference. Her words caught him off guard. No one had spoken to him like that in years not. Since before Brooks Tech became a household name. People either feared him or fawned over him, but no one dared to call him out on his mistakes. It was refreshing, in a way. Over the next few days, Emily did her best to nurse Daniel back to health. She fed him canned soup and stale crackers, the only food she could afford. She cleaned his cuts and bruises with antiseptic wipes she kept in the glove compartment. And she let him sleep in the passenger seat, which was slightly more comfortable. Than the floor dot at first, Daniel resented her kindness. He wasn't used to relying on others, especially not someone like Emily. But as time went on, he began to see her for who she truly was, strong, resilient, and unapologetically herself. She didn't care about his money or his status. To her, he was just another person in need of help. One afternoon, while they were parked near a park, Emily handed him a small notebook and a pen. "What's this for?" Daniel asked, puzzled. "Write down your thoughts," she suggested. "Get everything out of your head and onto paper. Trust me, it helps." Daniel hesitated, but eventually gave in. At first, his entries were short and scattered fragments of memories, half-formed ideas, and raw emotions. But as the days passed, his writing became more focused. He wrote about his frustrations with Brooks Tech, his regrets about missed opportunities, and his fears about the future. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. Meanwhile, Emily continued with her daily routine. She scavenged for scraps, sold odd items at flea markets, and occasionally picked up shifts at a local diner. Despite their vastly different circumstances, they fell into a rhythm together. Daniel helped her carry heavy bags, and she taught him how to bargain with street vendors. They weren't friends exactly, but they weren't strangers anymore either. One evening, as they sat side by side in the van eating cold sandwiches, Daniel broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" he asked suddenly. Helping me, I mean. You don't owe me anything. Emily shrugged. Maybe I just believe in second chances. But why me? I'm nobody special. She chuckled softly. You're wrong about that. You may not see it right now, but you've got potential. You just need to figure out what really matters to you. Her words lingered in his mind long after she drifted off to sleep. For the first time in months, Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe he wasn't beyond saving. Maybe, with Emily's help, he could find his way back to the person he used to be. As the sun rose the next morning, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel realized something important. He didn't want to return to his old life, not yet, anyway. Not until he figured out what kind of man he wanted to be. And perhaps, deep down, he already knew the answer. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's strength slowly returned. The fog in his mind began to clear, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. He wasn't the same man who had stumbled into Emily's van that rainy night. Something about her quiet, determination and unshakable optimism had sparked a change within him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was seeing the world and himself through fresh eyes. Emily noticed the shift too. Daniel was still far from perfect. He could be stubborn, impatient, and occasionally condescending. But there were moments when he let his guard down, revealing glimpses of the person he might have been before life weighed him down. She saw it, in the way he helped her sort through items at flea markets, or how he listened intently when she shared stories about her childhood. He was trying, even if he didn't always get it right. One afternoon, as they sat under the shade of a tree in a small park, Daniel decided to open up further. His voice was hesitant at first, but soon the words came tumbling out. "I've been thinking," he said, staring at the grass beneath his feet, "about Brookstick, about everything." Emily nodded, encouraging him to continue. "Go on." "It started out so simple," he explained. "Just me and a couple of friends working out of a garage. We wanted to create technology that would make people's lives better, not just flashier gadgets, but tools that mattered. Things that could solve real problems." He paused, shaking his head. "But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. The company grew, the stakes got higher, and I became someone I barely recognize." His confession surprised Emily. She had assumed Daniel was just another rich guy chasing profits. But hearing him talk about his original vision made her realize there was more to him than met the eye. "So what happened?" she asked gently. "The board happened," Daniel replied bitterly. "They started pushing for bigger numbers, faster growth, no matter the cost. They didn't care about innovation or impact. They cared about stock prices and quarterly reports. And then there were the lawsuits." He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Allegations of corruption, insider trading, you name it. It's all lies, but it doesn't matter. Once the media gets hold of something like that, it sticks." Emily frowned. "That's rough. But why are you letting them win? You're the CEO, aren't you?" "Technically, yes," Daniel admitted. "But I haven't been calling the shots for a while now. Between the board members scheming behind my back and my own issues." He gestured vaguely toward the empty bottle of whiskey sitting beside him. "I've been too distracted to fight back." Emily leaned forward, her expression serious. "Then maybe it's time you started fighting." Daniel looked at her, startled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said firmly, "you can't let them take everything from you. Not if this company actually means something to you. If you believe in what you started, if you still want to make a difference, then you need to stand up and take control." Her words struck a chord deep inside him. He had spent months wallowing in self-pity, drowning his sorrows in alcohol, and avoiding responsibility. But now, sitting here with Emily, he realized how much he had given up, not just his business, but his dignity, his purpose, and his pride. "I don't know where to start," he admitted quietly. "You start by figuring out what matters most." Emily said, "What do you want Brooksteck to be? Forget about the board, the lawsuits, all that noise. What's your dream for the company?" Daniel thought for a moment, his gaze distant. "I want it to help people," he said finally. "Real people, not just the ones who can afford expensive gadgets. I want to create technology that makes life easier, fairer, better. Like affordable internet access for underserved communities or sustainable energy solutions that don't destroy the planet." Emily smiled. "That sounds like a pretty good place to start." Over the next few days, they worked together to refine Daniel's ideas. Emily brought a practical perspective that Daniel lacked. She challenged him to think smaller and smarter, focusing on projects that could make an immediate impact rather than grandiose schemes that required massive resources. Together, they sketched out plans for low-cost devices designed to bridge the digital divide and eco-friendly products aimed at reducing waste. As they collaborated, their bond deepened. Daniel found himself drawn to Emily's resilience and creativity. She had none of the polish of the executives he usually dealt with, yet her insights were sharp and her instincts spot on. More importantly, she believed in him, even when he struggled to believe in himself. For Emily, spending time with Daniel was both inspiring and humbling. She had never imagined herself helping a billionaire rebuild his empire, but she couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing him grow. There were moments when his old habits surface, his tendency to bark orders or dismiss her suggestions, but she called him out every time, refusing to let him slip back into bad patterns. One evening, as they drove through the outskirts of town, Daniel spotted a newspaper vending machine. On impulse, he stopped the van and bought a copy. As he flipped through the pages, one headline caught his eye: "Brooksteck CEO missing amid corporate scandal." The article painted a grim picture of Brooksteck's current state. Shareholders were panicking, lawsuits were mounting, and rumors swirled about Daniel's alleged involvement in illegal activities. Worst of all, the board had appointed a temporary CEO arrival named Victor Langston, who was already making drastic changes to the company's direction. Daniel's hands trembled as he read the story. Anger and shame surged through him. But beneath those emotions lay a flicker of resolve. He couldn't let Langston or anyone else destroy what he had built. Not without a fight. "What are you going to do?" Emily asked softly, peering over his shoulder. "I'm going to fix this," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I don't know how yet, but I'm not giving up." Not again. Emily placed a hand on his arm, offering silent support. "You're not alone," she said simply. "Whatever happens, I've got your back." Her words meant more to Daniel than she could possibly know. For so long, he had faced the world alone, shouldering burdens too heavy for one person to bear. But now, for the first time in years, he had someone willing to stand beside him, not because of what he could offer, but because they truly cared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the road, Daniel felt a spark of hope ignite within him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it. With Emily by his side, he believed he could reclaim not only his company, but also his soul. The next morning, Daniel woke up with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since his downfall, he had a plan, or at least the beginnings of one. He wasn't going to let Victor Langston or anyone else destroy Brooksteck. The company might have been battered and bruised, but it still had potential. With Emily's help, he was determined to rebuild it into something better than it had ever been. Emily, however, was more cautious. She admired Daniel's newfound determination, but she also knew how much stood in their way. Reclaiming control of a multi-billion-dollar corporation wasn't as simple as snapping your fingers. There were lawsuits to deal with shareholders, to reassure, and enemies lurking around every corner. Still, she couldn't deny the excitement bubbling inside her. Helping Daniel rebuild Brooksteck felt like stepping into uncharted territory, and she was ready for the challenge. Their first step was gathering information. They needed to understand exactly what was happening within the company before they could make any moves. Daniel suggested reaching out to a few trusted employees who might still be loyal to him. But Emily vetoed the idea immediately. "You can't trust anyone right now," she warned. "Not until you know for sure who's on your side. If word gets out that you're planning something, Langston will crush you before you even get started." Daniel reluctantly agreed. Instead, they decided to do some digging themselves. Using a prepaid phone Emily had bought at a convenience store, Daniel called Brooksteck's customer service line, pretending to be an investor seeking updates. The operator confirmed what they already suspected. Morale within the company was low, and many employees were unhappy with Langston's leadership. "They say he's cutting corners everywhere," Daniel reported after hanging up. "Projects are being shelved, budgets slashed, and people are getting laid off left and right. It's chaos." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "That works in our favor. If we can show the board and the public that Langston is ruining the company, we might have a chance to take him down." "But how?" Daniel asked. "I don't exactly have access to my accounts or resources anymore. I'm practically broke." Emily smirked. "You're not broke. You've got me." Over the next few days, Emily put her resourcefulness to work. She scoured online forums and social media, piecing together information about Brooksteck's recent activities. She reached out to former employees under the guise of conducting market research, gaining valuable insights into the company's struggles. Meanwhile, Daniel focused on drafting a proposal outlining his vision for Brooksteck's future. It wasn't just a business plan. It was a promise to restore integrity and innovation to the company. As they worked, their partnership grew stronger. Emily pushed Daniel to think outside the box, encouraging him to focus on grassroots strategies rather than relying on traditional corporate tactics. For instance, she suggested creating a viral campaign highlighting Brooksteck's original mission and values. By appealing directly to consumers, they could generate public support and pressure the board to reconsider Langston's leadership. "People love a comeback story," Emily explained. "If we frame this as you returning to save a company from ruin, they'll eat it up." Daniel was skeptical at first. He wasn't used to thinking small or playing to emotions. But the more he listened to Emily, the more he realized she was right. His old approach relying on power and money hadn't worked. Maybe it was time to try something different. Their biggest breakthrough came when Emily discovered an article about Brooksteck's upcoming annual shareholder meeting. It was scheduled to take place in 2 weeks, and all key stakeholders would be in attendance, including Victor Langston. "This is our shot," Emily said excitedly. "If we can get you in front of those shareholders, you can make your case. Show them why you're the right person to lead the company." "But how do I get in?" Daniel asked. "I'm not exactly welcome there." "We'll figure it out," Emily assured him. "We'll crash the party if we have to." With less than 2 weeks to prepare, they threw themselves into action. Daniel rehearsed his speech over and over, refining it until every word rang true. Emily helped him create a slideshow presentation showcasing his plans for Brooksteck's revival. They even filmed a short video featuring testimonials from former employees praising Daniel's leadership and condemning Langston's mismanagement to fund their efforts. Emily sold off some of the items she'd collected during her scavenging trips. She convinced a local printer to produce flyers advertising Daniel's return, agreeing to pay him once they secured funding. Every penny counted, and neither of them complained about the sacrifices they had to make. On the day of the shareholder meeting, nerves ran high. Daniel dressed in the only clean suit he owned, which Emily had patched up with needle and thread. She wore a borrowed dress and styled her hair neatly, determined to look professional despite their limited resources. Together, they drove to the conference center where the event was being held. Getting inside proved easier than expected. Emily posed as a journalist covering the meeting, flashing a fake press badge she had made using Photoshop. Daniel tagged, along as her assistant, carrying a briefcase filled with their materials. Once inside, they blended into the crowd, keeping a low profile until the right moment arrived, when Victor Langston took the stage to deliver his opening remarks. Daniel felt a surge of anger. The man exuded arrogance, boasting about his plans to streamline Brooks Tech while ignoring the damage he was causing. As Langston droned on, Emily gave Daniel a reassuring nod. This was their cue. Taking a deep breath, Daniel stood up and walked toward the podium. Murmurs rippled through the audience as people recognized him. Langston froze mid-sentence, his face turning red with fury. "What is the meaning of this?" Langston demanded, glaring at Daniel. "I'm here to remind everyone what Brooks Tech is really about," Daniel replied calmly. Ignoring Langston's protests, he turned to address the room. "My name is Daniel Brooks, and I founded this company because I believed technology could change the world for the better. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that mission. But today, I'm here to tell you that we can get it back." For the next 20 minutes, Daniel delivered the speech of his life. He spoke passionately about his vision for Brooks Tech's future, emphasizing ethics, sustainability, and innovation. He showed videos of real people whose lives had been improved by the company's products and shared stories from former employees who missed the collaborative spirit of the early days. By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause. Langston tried to regain control, but it was too late. Shareholders began questioning his decisions, demanding explanations for the layoffs and budget cuts. One by one, they voiced their support for Daniel, calling for his reinstatement as CEO. When the meeting adjourned hours later, Daniel and Emily stepped outside, exhausted but triumphant. The battle wasn't over yet. They still had lawsuits and board members to contend with, but they had taken the first crucial step toward reclaiming Brooks Tech. As they climbed back into the van, Emily grinned at Daniel. "Not bad for a guy who was sleeping in a dumpster a month ago, huh?" Daniel laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "I couldn't have done it without you." Emily shrugged modestly, but her smile said it all. Together, they had proven that sometimes the greatest victories come from the unlikeliest partnerships. And as they drove off into the night, Daniel knew one thing for certain. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. The victory at the shareholder meeting was just the beginning. While Daniel had managed to win back the trust of many investors, the road ahead was still fraught with obstacles. Victor Langston wasn't about to step aside quietly, and the lawsuits against Brooks Tech and by extension, Daniel were far from resolved. The board members who had supported Langston were scrambling to protect their interests, spreading rumors and misinformation in an attempt to undermine Daniel's credibility. But Daniel and Emily weren't backing down. They knew this fight would require more than speeches and goodwill. It would take strategy, patience, and a lot of hard work. For the next several weeks, they poured all their energy into rebuilding Brooks Tech's reputation and proving that Daniel was the right person. To lead the company, Emily became Daniel's unofficial advisor, helping him navigate the complex web of corporate politics. She insisted he stay grounded, reminding him constantly of the values they had outlined in his proposal. "You're not here to play games," she told him one evening as they pored over legal documents in the van. "You're here to fix what's broken. Don't lose sight of that." Daniel nodded, grateful for her guidance. Without Emily, he doubted he would have made it this far. Her practical wisdom and unwavering support kept him focused when the pressure threatened to overwhelm him. Their first major challenge came when a rival tech company leaked false information about Brooks Tech's finances. The report claimed the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, citing fabricated data and anonymous sources. Within hours, panic spread among shareholders, and Brooks Tech's stock price plummeted. Daniel felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. He had worked so hard to regain control, only to see everything slipping away again. For a moment, he considered giving up. What was the point of fighting if the odds were always stacked against him? But Emily refused to let him quit. "This is exactly what they want," she said firmly, slamming her fist on the dashboard. "They're trying to scare you off. If you walk away now, they win. But how do we fight this?" Daniel asked, his voice heavy with frustration. "We don't have the resources to counteract lies like these." "Then we use the truth," Emily replied. "People will listen if you show them the facts. You've got loyal employees, satisfied customers, and solid projects in the pipeline. Let their voices speak for you." With Emily's encouragement, Daniel launched a grassroots campaign to combat the smear tactics. He reached out to former colleagues and clients, asking them to share their experiences with Brooks Tech online. Employees posted heartfelt messages about the company's positive impact, while customers praised its innovative products. Social media lit up with hashtags like #SaveBrooksTech and #RealLeadership, turning public opinion in their favor. Meanwhile, Emily took matters into her own hands. Using her network of contacts from years of scavenging and odd jobs, she tracked down the source of the false report. It turned out to be a disgruntled former employee who had been paid off by Langston to fabricate the story. Armed with evidence, Daniel filed a formal complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission, exposing the conspiracy. The backlash was swift. Langston's allies began distancing themselves from him, and the rival company issued a public apology for spreading misinformation. Brooks Tech's stock price stabilized, and investor confidence slowly returned. Though the damage had been significant, Daniel and Emily had managed to turn the tide. Despite their success, tensions between them began to surface. Daniel's old habits occasionally resurfaced, especially under stress. There were moments when he reverted to his domineering ways, barking orders or dismissing Emily's suggestions without fully considering them. Each time, Emily called him out, refusing to tolerate behavior that undermined their partnership. "You can't treat me like one of your executives," she snapped during one particularly heated argument. "I'm not here because I want your money or your approval. I'm here because I believe in you. But if you keep acting like this, I won't stick around." Her words hit home. Daniel realized how close he had come to losing her, not just as an ally, but as a friend. From that day forward, he made a conscious effort to listen more and dictate less. Their relationship deepened as a result, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As the weeks passed, Brooks Tech began to stabilize. Under Daniel's leadership, the company shifted its focus towards sustainable innovation, launching pilot programs aimed at underserved communities. One project involved developing affordable internet devices for rural areas, while another focused on creating eco-friendly gadgets designed to reduce electronic waste. Emily played a key role in these initiatives, drawing on her understanding of grassroots needs. She traveled with Daniel to meet potential partners and stakeholders, ensuring their plans aligned with real-world challenges. Together, they inspired a new wave of enthusiasm within the company, rekindling the collaborative spirit that had once defined Brooks Tech. Victor Langston, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, stripped of his temporary CEO title and discredited by the SEC investigation. He disappeared from the public eye. Though Daniel felt a pang of satisfaction knowing his rival had been defeated, he chose not to dwell on it. Revenge wasn't part of his vision for the future. By the end of the summer, Brooksteck was thriving once again. Shareholders expressed renewed confidence in Daniel's leadership, and employees praised the positive changes sweeping through the organization. The media hailed his comeback as one of the most remarkable turnarounds in corporate history. Despite the accolades, Daniel never forgot where he had come from or who had helped him get there. On a quiet evening in late August, as they sat together in the van watching the sunset, he turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. "I owe you everything," he said softly. "Without you, none of this would have been possible." Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You did the hard work, Daniel. I just gave you a little push." "It was more than that," he insisted. "You reminded me of who I used to be and who I could still become. I'll never be able to repay you for that." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. "You already have, by proving that second chances are worth fighting for." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them crackled with unspoken emotions, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper neither was quite ready to name. Whatever the future held, they both knew one thing for certain. Their lives had changed forever because of each other. As darkness fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he would honor the lessons Emily had taught him, to stay humble, to value people over profits, and to never stop believing in the power of redemption. Months passed, and Brooksteck continued to thrive under Daniel's leadership. The company's new focus on sustainable innovation had captured the attention of consumers and investors alike. Their first major product launch, a low-cost, eco-friendly device designed to provide internet access to underserved communities, was met with widespread acclaim. It wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was proof that businesses could prioritize ethics and still succeed. For Daniel, the success felt surreal. He had gone from being a man lost in despair to someone who inspired hope. But as proud as he was of what they had achieved, he knew none of it would have been possible without Emily. She had been his anchor through the darkest days, pushing him to be better and reminding him of the values that truly mattered. Emily, too, had changed. Helping Daniel rebuild Brooksteck had given her a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. For so long, she had drifted through life, surviving, day by day, without much direction. Now, she saw herself as part of something bigger, a movement to create positive change. And while she still lived out of her van, she no longer felt like an outsider looking in. She belonged. One crisp autumn morning, Daniel approached Emily with an idea that had been brewing in his mind for weeks. "I want you to join Brooksteck officially," he said, his tone earnest. "You've done more for this company than anyone else, and I think your perspective is exactly what we need moving forward." Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised by the offer. "Me? Work at Brooksteck? Why not?" Daniel replied. "You've already proven how valuable you are. We can give you a proper role, maybe something in community outreach or product development. Whatever fits best." She hesitated, unsure of how to respond. On one hand, the idea of working for such a prestigious company was exciting. On the other hand, she worried about losing the independence she cherished. Could she really fit into a world so different from her own? "I don't know, Daniel," she said finally. "It's a big step. What if I mess things up?" "You won't," he assured her. "And even if you do, we'll figure it out together. Besides, I trust you more than anyone else." His words warmed her heart, but she needed time to think. Over the next few days, she weighed the pros and cons, imagining what her life might look like as part of Brooksteck. Ultimately, she decided to accept the offer, not because she wanted fame or fortune, but because she believed in the company's mission and wanted to see it grow. Daniel wasted no time integrating Emily into the team. He introduced her to Key, staff members and encouraged her to share her ideas openly. At first, some employees were skeptical of her unconventional background, but it didn't take long for them to recognize her unique strengths. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life proved invaluable, especially when launching initiatives aimed at marginalized communities. Together, Daniel and Emily tackled challenges head-on, always keeping their shared vision at the forefront. They worked tirelessly, often late into the night, brainstorming ways to expand Brooksteck's reach while staying true to its core values. Though their schedules were demanding, they made sure to carve out moments for themselves, to laugh, to reflect, and to simply enjoy each other's company. As winter approached, Brooksteck hosted a gala to celebrate the successful launch of their latest product. The event was held at a sleek downtown venue, attended by industry leaders, media personalities, and loyal customers. For Daniel, it was a chance to showcase the company's achievements and thank those who had supported them along the way. Emily stood beside him as they greeted guests, her simple yet elegant dress drawing admiring glances. Despite the glamour surrounding her, she remained grounded, chatting warmly with attendees and sharing stories about Brooksteck's journey. Watching her interact with others, Daniel couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. She had come so far from scavenging dumpsters to standing confidently among Silicon Valley's elite. During his speech, Daniel took a moment to acknowledge Emily publicly. "None of this would have been possible without her," he said, gesturing toward her. "She reminded me of why I started this company in the first place and helped me rediscover my purpose." The room erupted in applause, and Emily blushed, waving off the attention. But deep down, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just Daniel's victory. It was hers, too. After the gala, they returned to the van for old time's sake. Sitting side by side on the cracked leather seats, they reflected on everything they had accomplished together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found you that night?" Emily asked, breaking the silence. "All the time," Daniel admitted. "But I like to think things happen for a reason. Maybe fate brought us together for moments like this." Emily smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Whatever the reason, I'm glad it did." As the city lights twinkled outside, neither of them spoke for a while. Words weren't necessary. They both knew they had formed a bond stronger than any title or paycheck, a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. In the months that followed, Brooksteck continued to grow, expanding its reach and impact around the world. Daniel became known not just as a successful CEO, but as a champion of ethical business practices. Emily, meanwhile, carved out her own legacy, inspiring others to embrace innovation with heart. Though their lives had changed dramatically, they remained steadfast in their commitment to each other and to the values that had guided them from the start. Together, they proved that even the unlikeliest pair could achieve greatness, not by chasing wealth or power, but by believing in the possibility of a better future. And as they stood side by side at the next company event, surrounded by cheering crowds and flashing cameras, neither could imagine a better ending to their unlikely story.